Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our show. Tonight, Mike and I are joined by Dave Spinks. He's got many strings to his bow. He's founded the Society of the Supernatural. He's written books on West Virginia hauntings and West Virginia Bigfoot. He's got interest in UFOs and other cryptozoological creatures. So, without further ado, Dave, welcome to our show, and thank you very much for being on it tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me, Adam.
Excellent. Now, I want to talk about a number of things, and we've only got an hour, so we're going to try and get to your really depth of knowledge on a number of different issues. We'll start with hauntings. Can you tell us about some of your most recent and intense, possibly, haunting investigations? What happened?
Well, one of the cases that comes to mind is a case I've been working on in northern West Virginia. It's a residential case. This family has been experiencing all kinds of paranormal activity. Going back to several years ago, probably 15 years, 12 years now, they discovered a headstone in their backyard when they were digging around doing different yard work and stuff. And ever since that time, they dug that headstone up. They have been experiencing all sorts of, basically the whole gambit of paranormal activity. Strange light anomalies, strange unexplained sounds, footsteps in their house, and most recently, the mother, she's an elderly lady, it's so much to the point that they have put security cameras inside their house trying to capture this activity. And the old woman, she's up there, you know, she's around 80, I believe, and she was there was some security cam footage her son sent me where she was sleeping in the bed, and something jerked her completely out of the bed, and she fell crashing to the floor and smashing her head on the wall. And it took her quite some time.
Did it have the legs or what? How did it jerk her out? What happened?
Well, in the video, it appeared that something had manipulated the sheets and blankets around her leg area. And as she realized something, you know, it looked like she was being pulled slightly from her legs, and she woke up and she tried to, kind of twist and look down at her feet. And at that time, it appeared that something basically just yanked her and threw her out of the bed. And it took her quite some time to get up. Now, this is an ongoing case I'm currently investigating and trying to help this family on for over a year now, and the activity still continues. And it's an ongoing investigation, and that's some of the things we deal with when we do this type of, when we investigate this type of phenomena. I mean, this stuff can go on for years with families.
And how do you investigate it, Dave? I mean, what sort of methodology do you use in order to determine what might be troubling the family? Well,
you got to come into these things with an open mind, and I me personally, I kind of draw off my law enforcement background. I try to concentrate on the who, what, where, when, and why, to try to get to the bottom. Of course, you have to try to debunk anything you can, and then you can try different aspects. It's kind of a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get when you're investigating these hauntings, and other cases as well. But you go in there, you might try some religious provocation to see if it is a possible demonic type activity. And if not, you have to do a lot of background research on the history of the land, the property. There's just many different ways you can run with it to try to, and attempt to figure out what is causing this activity in the home.
So were you a police officer then, Dave?
I was a federal law enforcement officer for 8 years and a state law enforcement officer for 2 years. I worked in the prison systems and then in the federal system as well.
So how long have you been involved in doing sort of research of a paranormal or cryptid nature now?
Well, for me, it started back in 1983 here in West Virginia when me and my grandfather were on a fishing trip, and we experienced what I could only call a Bigfoot, along this particular river. It's about 5 miles away from my house where I live today. And, I started pursuing answers as to what the heck it was that I saw that day with him. And back in those days, we didn't have the luxury of the internet. We had to rely on the local libraries and magazines. And then I came across the show In Search Of, and I realized quickly that, hey, I wasn't the only person that saw this thing. I didn't even know what Bigfoot was back in those days. I was 13 years old. I didn't even know about the Patterson-Gimlin film. I had no clue about these large, hairy creatures roaming the world, And so many, I soon discovered, so many people had seen these things all around the world. And then, as you go into it, for me, I've experienced a few other things over the years early on that just hooked me in, and, I started researching as much as I could about it and learning about it. And in my working career, as I got older, people would be experiencing things in their homes, and somebody would say, well, I know a guy that looks into that stuff. And I started investigating various locations, and it's just a hobby gone insane, really, and when I retired from law enforcement in 2011, I had amassed quite a caseload of different cases and different things I've investigated and researched, and I started going public with it,
Okay, so let's go back. I'm interested in the Bigfoot story, but we'll go back to it later on. I just want to focus in a little bit on this family and the sighting. You said that the clothing had been interfered with. The grandmother, someone had jerked it. What happened? What did you conclude? What happened next?
Well, we don't know yet. This just recently happened a few days ago, so I haven't had a chance. I'm going to go back up there. This particular case is what I would consider a very negative case for whatever reason. There was another team involved in this house years ago, and they captured some very, very just troubling pictures. One that looked, you can only describe it as what we would call, in modern culture, there's all these drawings of what people think a demon may look like, or, what the church may call a demon, a typical horned head, goat face type of creature. Well, they captured that, and they brought in a priest, and a shadow figure went running towards the priest and went into him, so to speak, and he had a very negative reaction to all of this, and they captured that on video, and that was years ago. This has been an ongoing case for many years.
So they captured a picture. Let's just so I'm clear. So they captured a picture of a creature that looked like the classic thing of a demon. Is that correct?
Right. Almost your typical, something very similar to a depiction of a demon in modern days, or even in some of the ancient, I wouldn't say ancient, but older religious texts.
And they saw a shadow figure as well. Yeah, was this priest an exorcist, or what was he?
No, he was just going in to try to bless the home. It was just a typical, your normal priest going in trying to help the family. Another religious clergy was brought in. They were down, and this happened to be a woman, and she was going to do a blessing on the house because the first priest did not complete what he set out to do. He would not return to the home. So they brought in someone else of I think it was Baptist or Methodist minister to help bless the home. They went into the crawl space, and she claimed that something threw dirt in her face in the dirt, from the dirt on the ground in the crawl space, and she left and did not return. So the family's really, they've been reaching out for help for years. They've been taken advantage of by certain folks, and other investigators have come in and not done anything, and that's where I come in over a year ago, and now I'm taking up the case trying to help them. And
is it still the same family that have lived in this house all these years? I mean, they didn't get a cut price deal or something. I mean, what happened?
Yes, I mean, it's an elderly mother and her son, and the father also. The father recently died in the home. He did not die in the home, but he died recently. And right before he died, they had him in a medical bed in the home, and he sat straight up in the bed, and he was in really bad shape. And he told the family on one occasion that he just saw the devil walk through the house, and it was a dark shadow figure type entity that he witnessed, and then he died a short time later after witnessing this. So, there's pretty much the whole gambit is going on in this house. They've captured numerous EVPs. Things have flown off the walls, pictures and whatnot. I've got, he's shown me video evidence of all this. And I've collected some of my own pretty interesting things to back up his claims. And there's more to be done there. So, that's one particular case I'm working on at this time.
Okay, Dave. Right. Scenario
I actually wrote about it. It's actually, the first part of that is in my new book, too, as well.
Okay. This is new. Excellent. So here's a scenario for you, Dave. It's night. Yeah. Okay. And it's a storm. It's nearly midnight. How much would you have to be paid to spend the night alone in that house?
No, I do it for free, man. That's what I do.
You do it for free?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you try to, the paranormal is not to, being a paranormal investigator is, you got to try to help people. I mean, that's what a lot of it's about. You're trying to come to a conclusion and trying to help these people. Some of these people are living a living hell in their homes, and they don't have the financial. Yeah, and they don't have the financial means to just up and move, or sell their home and leave.
No.
So you have to try to help them and try to knock out that activity if possible.
So that begs the question. You want to help them. They're obviously suffering a lot. Flippancy aside, they're suffering a lot. So how do you feel that you can help them? What are you going to do that's going to help them in that situation?
Well, in a lot of cases, as far as the church is involved, if the church goes, you have to bring legitimate evidence to them and show them, hey, this is what I did, this is what I documented, and if you show specific types of evidence to them, and it depends what each religion is different, and local aspects of those religions, some will help, some will not. If you're not a member of that particular church, they're not going to help you, unfortunately. So, there's certain people that I work with and I can get a hold of that I will show them what I've documented. They trust me enough to know that if I bring them something that's legitimate, they're going to take heed of it, and they're going to go and try to help that family cleanse that property, and possibly even themselves if they may have an attachment of some sort from these negative entities or whatever they are that are causing this paranormal phenomena, and you just got to go from there. It can be a slow and long process at times.
Do you have a particular denomination that you work with? Because you mentioned the church, but obviously there's anything from, if we're talking about the church, we're talking about Christian churches, I think there's anything from Catholic, Baptist, Evangelical.
I am a particular denomination, but I won't say that on here, but I also work with shamans. I work with various religious backgrounds because each situation is different. You may have, take for instance, a Native American area that there's something of that sort causing the disturbances in that location, or you may have something else that the church needs to take care of. You just never know. And I like to keep various people involved depending on what we think we might need at each individual given location.
Okay, so so say these things are being exercised. Let's say you go back to this house and you exercise them, obviously with the help of somebody who's religious. Where are they going to when you've exercised them?
That's a good question. At that particular moment, we don't know where they go to. That's up in the air. But if we can, if we can get them out of there, that's good for the family, you know.
Absolutely, but you must have thought about it, though. And where do you think they might go? I mean, if you exorcise a demon, where's it going, do you think?
Hopefully it's going back to hell. You know what I mean? I mean, who knows where they go, but if they leave that particular location and that family alone, that's what we strive for. You know, we're trying to give relief to some of these people that are living through these very negative situations.
Have you ever been afraid in any of these situations? Have you ever thought, you know what, this is not great?
Years ago, I was brought in to document evidence of a particular case, and I did witness a exorcism. I filmed it for the church, and it was very frightening, unnerving. And then there's been some other, you know, instances where I've been attacked a few times, and that is very unnerving when you realize that these things that are unseen can reach out and harm you physically.
So can you tell us about the exorcism incident, or is it too harrowing for you? I don't want to do anything that causes you suffering.
I'll just give you the broad strokes. I mean, we don't have all night here, but I mean, I witnessed a person contorting in ways the human body should not be able to contort. I witnessed different languages coming out of this person's mouth that there's no way in hell they knew what they were saying, and they never were exposed to that language.
What sorts of languages?
Latin, and according to the priest, there was some words that were said that were from an even more ancient language than that, like Aramaic. And just horrific growls and smells that, you know, would just putrid smells of feces and urine and rotting flesh type smells, just horrendous things, man.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Was the person saved in the end? Did they manage to be successfully exorcised?
Yes.
Oh, I'm good. I'm happy for them. Now, when you say you've been attacked, can you tell us what happened to you? Can you give us an example? I don't want to make it all too dark, but I just want to understand. People often see ghosts as being very lightweight, but there's obviously a darker side to them, and then it's not regularly explored. So I wanted to ask you. So tell us about when you've been attacked.
Well, I'll give you one instance that was pretty intense for me and a good friend of mine who you know, David Weatherly. We were at this old brothel up in Indiana, and it was ran by the Chicago mob way back in the early 1900s, 1920s, and so on and so forth. We had been investigating the upper floor of this place where the girls would have been, and we were in this bathroom, a very large bathroom that was in the place, and he was in there conducting a ghost box session. Well, while he was doing that, I was filming him, and then I went in the room with him to set down a piece of equipment on the floor, and this wave of energy just went right through me, knocked me backwards a little bit, and I got really dizzy. And at the same time, the ghost box was saying all these negative type things, you know, get out pig and all this kind of crazy stuff. And it was saying his name was Ian because he was trying to get information out of it. And he told me when this wave of energy hit me, he said, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know. This wave of energy hit me." He goes, "You don't look very good. You better sit down." So I went back behind the camera and sat down while he continued on with the session. And as I'm sitting there, I kept feeling this cobweb sensation on the top of my head. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you ever have walked into a cobweb and it gets in your hair and stuff, you feel that and you kind of swipe it off. And I kept feeling that over and over. Well, as that was happening, he asked the ghost box, "What did you do to Dave?" And he said a clear and distinct response said, "I hit him," and then laughs going, you know, it just let out this evil laugh like ha ha ha, like that. And he said, "What did you hit him with?" And it replied, "Shovel." Well, so as it went on, it got more negative and more negative on these responses, threatening us, and he shut the ghost box down, and we went downstairs to take a break from all of this, and I felt that cobweb sensation on my head. Well, I touched my head, and as I felt something on my fingers, and I brought my fingers down and looked at them, and my fingers were covered in blood, and I had a very large knot and a cut on my head.
And it was actually your blood. Forgive me for asking such a question. So it physically manifested itself as a real injury.
Yes, I had a knot on my head and it was bleeding. So not only did we get the ghost box saying he hit me with a shovel, I actually had a physical mark on my head with a gash, or a small little cut gash that was bleeding on the top of my head.
And how do you feel about that now?
Well, it's unnerving, man. I mean, it messed me up for several days going, wow, this thing was really intense. When you realize something can punch through, into our dimension, so to speak, and really physically, hurt you, it's a very unnerving experience. And, carrying on with that same case, the very next day, we were downstairs because we stayed in this place for an entire week and investigated it for 5 days. The very next day, we were in the dining room downstairs, and that same voice was coming across the ghost box, and David was kind of giving him down the road for attacking me after he made his presence known again. David started kind of berating him, saying, why did you attack Dave, and so on and so forth, and he started threatening David and told him he was going to slice him. And within about 15 minutes or less, David's back started burning, and he had a long-sleeve Under Armour shirt on with a short-sleeve shirt over top of that tucked into his pants because it was cold. And I said, lift up your shirt. This was all on camera. He lifted up his shirt, and he had 3 giant scratches from the top of his left shoulder down below his belt line that were it was done really hard because they were just about to bleed, and they were raised up giant scratches down his back, and they were huge. And he became pretty violently ill, throwing up within a few minutes after that incident. So 2 different days, 2 different people, we were attacked by this same entity. We're calling himself Ian. So, when you realize these things can reach out and really physically do something to you, it's pretty unnerving. It can be dangerous. I often tell people, hey, you never know what you're walking into when you're investigating these situations. So, be mindful, make sure you protect yourselves religiously, whatever your religious beliefs are, because I've had stuff follow me home. I've been attacked by unseen forces, and I've seen some pretty unnerving stuff in my day.
So what happened with Ian then? How did you deal with him in the end? Did you just leave, or what happened?
No, we didn't leave. We stayed there, and we kept documenting. We kept documenting evidence. We were capturing numerous EVPs. We heard heavy foot, like someone was wearing heavy boots upstairs. And actually, the first night we walked in the place, we heard it sounded like someone with heavy boots was walking upstairs. The sounds came down the stairs, and the front door opened, and we ran over there, and there was nobody there. There was actually snow on the ground, and there was no foot tracks leading out of the place. And that's how the whole ordeal started the first night we walked in, within minutes of walking into this place. And you can imagine, we got all kinds of responses referring to pigs and, stuff like that, and you can imagine me being ex-law enforcement. If it was a joint ran by the mob, they're not going to like police officers. So these things are intelligent. They know what you are, what you have been, and they will use that, So you just got to mind your P's and Q's and be on guard and not let your guard down when you're investigating.
Now, you said that you had some of this on footage and been filming. Is there any way that people can actually see any of this, or is it confidential?
No, you can see some of our stuff. If you go to YouTube, I got a lot of stuff on YouTube. Mm-hmm. You can check out Real Supernatural on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of investigation videos on there. And the Society of the Supernatural YouTube page as well, SOS. There's a lot of stuff that me and David Weatherly have done on there, and you can see some of that stuff we've captured on camera.
Can you remember the specific reference to the Ian incident, or would people have to look through it to find it?
Just look up the Rhodes Hotel.
The what hotel?
Rhodes, R-O-A-D-S.
The Rhodes Hotel. Great, thank you very much. Now, when we think about spirits, obviously we focused on some of the darker ones. Am I correct in thinking that there's a whole spectrum of entities? Are there benevolent ones or more neutral ones? Have you ever encountered any of those?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been thousands of times we've documented things that were not negative in nature, but shadow figures. I mean, those can be either way. They can be negative, or just you capture an entity on film, or on camera. Light anomalies, strange mists, EVPs. Just
what is a shadow figure for people who don't know? I mean, explain what it might be, if you don't mind, please, Dave.
What, a shadow figure?
Yes.
It would seem that in most cases over the years, what people I've interviewed and stuff, they associate those with some type of negative entity. They feel scared. It feels heavy. Bad things are happening, but not in all cases. Just in most of those, it seems that in most cases these things are not human spirits. They are something else. That meaning that they never had a human soul. And that's the difference between a spirit and an entity, if you will.
And what do they want, these shadow things?
Nobody knows. I mean, we don't know what any of these things want. Why are they here? What are they doing here? That's part of what we're doing. We're trying to find pieces to the puzzle to some of man's greatest questions. What happens when we die? Are there unknown creatures walking among us? And are we alone in the universe? We don't know. These things could be ETs for all we know. We don't know. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to document. We're trying to collect evidence and trying to figure out what exactly some of these things are.
Good. Have you ever had a really positive encounter with a spirit, or felt that it was in some way trapped and helped it to move over to the other side, wherever that may be?
I've had numerous experiences over the years like that, but I'll give you one that pertains to me specifically. Several years after my Bigfoot encounter, I was at my dad's house, and this refers to my mom's dad, and I was at my dad's house, which my mom's dad's house was 30 miles away. And my grandfather on my mom's side was a very sick man. He smoked like a freight train. He only had like a quarter of one lung left, and he actually had a trach. He actually had a trach, where he had to have oxygen all the time so he could breathe. Well, that particular night, I woke up for some reason in the middle of the night. I don't even know what time it was. Sometime between probably 2 and 4 in the morning. I sat straight up in bed, and at the foot of the bed there stood my mother's dad. And he looked really good, and he was solid as me and you. He wasn't see-through. He wasn't transparent in any way. And I just kind of, wiped my eyes because I'm like, what do you do? And I said, what are you doing here, Grandpa? And he didn't say anything. He just smiled, and then he disappeared right in front of my eyes. And I was like, wow, that was a freaky dream, and I went back to sleep. Well, the next day, this was still on my mind, as you can imagine. So I called up to him. I called up to his house to check on him, and my uncle from out of state answered the phone. And I said, what are you doing there? And he said, no one called you yet, Dave? And I said, no. Why? He said, well, your grandpa died last night. We're all coming in for the funeral. So I kind of sat there dumbfounded for a minute going, wow, what the heck was, that's freaky as hell. And I never said anything to anyone about this dream I had, quotation marks dream, until about 6 months later. We were up at my grandma's house with her, and, everybody was eating dinner, and we were just talking, and this was on my mind that night of that dream. And I just came out. I said, man, I'm saying to myself, I want to tell everybody, but they're going to think I'm nuts. But I went ahead and told them, I said, hey, the night Grandpa died, I sat up in the bed, and there he was at the foot of the bed, and found out the next day he died, from my uncle. And several of my other family's members' faces went funny looking, and they all said they had the same exact thing happen to them the night he died. So I knew right then and there that he had come to say goodbye to me before he went to wherever he was going. And that was just another one of those things that hooked me even deeper into wanting to know answers as to what happens, when we die. And, one thing led to another, and I see the shows, the TV show In Search Of, and I see a guy on there by the name of Hans Holzer, and he has a tape recorder doing EVPs that's very similar to the one I had just gotten for Christmas that I used to record music off the radio with. And I said, hey, I can do that, So when we went on family vacations and stuff, I would take my recorder with my microphone and I would attempt to get EVPs. And lo and behold, I started capturing EVPs. So, that's really some of the things that got me going many years ago in this field.
Well, I mean, that was a great story. Thank you for that. When you think about the sort of ghost images, one of the things that pops into my mind, what's your clearest example of something that you videoed that you thought, as an image rather than EVP, that you thought was a ghost? I mean, can you tell me about what happened, and could we find it on your YouTube channel? That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, you can. I got one for you. It's I don't know if you've ever heard of this place, but it's called Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum here in West Virginia. I was in the building with a couple of friends of mine, other investigators, and we were the only ones in there at the time. It's a massive building where over 20,000 people have died over the years. It's an old insane asylum.
Has it been on TV before? I'm sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah, many times. Yeah, it's been on TV many times. So we were on the second floor, and we had a camera set up shooting from the end of the hall down to the towards the middle of the building where the hallway led. And we had a ghost box running, and we kept hearing this little girl's voice saying, help. That's all she would say, and you could tell it was a little girl. She was saying help. And we were trying to communicate with her, but we weren't getting any responses to our questions. All we kept hearing was help every so often. So as we're shooting down the hallway, we began to see various light anomalies, appear down the hallway. Well, and we heard a few noises and whatnot and got a few EVPs. But later on, after returning home, I reviewed that footage, and as clear as a bell, there is a shadow figure that was standing about 20 to 30 feet from us on the left side of the hall, and you see this thing clearly just turn and walk sideways, walk from one side of the hall into the other. So there's doors going on both sides of this hallway because they were patient rooms, right? So it was standing on the left side, and it walks from left to right, and you can see the head, shoulders, torso, the arm swing, the legs moving, the whole 9 yards. And it's, walks from left to right across the hall, and we captured it on camera. So it's a pretty compelling piece. It's a little bit dark and grainy, but if you watch closely and I annotate where it's at, you can see it as clear as a bell.
And again, if people wanted to find that on your YouTube channel, what would be the reference?
It's on Real Supernatural under Trans-Allegheny. There's a couple of videos on there, and you can see it.
Excellent. How did you feel when that happened? Were you excited, afraid?
No, I was amazed because that was essentially the first piece of, something on film that I captured something that significant. I was blown away by it.
Excellent. I mean, when you think about these ghosts, do you? I mean, obviously we talked about demons, about these other things. What do you think they might be? Have you any idea? Or you just I
think I think some of them are lost souls for whatever reason. Some of them don't know they're dead and they're just here. Some of them may know they're dead, and they're here checking on their loved ones. Or others may have died a tragic death, and they have unfinished business, or they're watching over their family members, or things to that effect. I think each one may have its own story. We don't know. That's some of the things we look into. When someone dies a horrific death, that, in my point of view, my opinion is that energy stains the very ground or house or whatever the case may be. It stains that energy stays there forever. Until it's somehow released or whatever the case, I believe that it's, those tragic type of deaths, or, you find a lot of these battlefields, these young men in the prime of their lives, were gunned down almost instantly. Some of them don't even know they're dead. and they're just still there. Their energy is there. Their soul is there, and they're still doing what they did when their death happened.
Yeah, so it's almost like a replay thing in some way.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's different types of hauntings too. You have the residual haunt that plays over and over again like a record, or you have an intelligent haunt where these spirits are, they will interact with you. You can communicate with them on occasions, and you can ask them questions, and they will respond to your questions. So, it's just fascinating stuff, and it fascinates me to this day when I'm in a location by myself and I ask a question and I'm using a recorder and I play it back and I have an intelligent response to my questions. How do you explain that? You can't.
Excellent. Now, I want to move back slightly to what we talked about in the first sort of 10 minutes or so, because we basically touched on it. You said you had a Bigfoot encounter earlier on when you were 13, and this sort of crystallized your interest in a wide range of topics. Can you tell me where you were and what happened?
Yeah, I was on the Gauley River here in West Virginia, fishing with my grandfather, my dad's dad, and we had caught our limit of trout, and we had cooked them up, and we ate a really good meal on the fire, and we were just kicking back, relaxing, when this huge splash occurred out in the middle of the river. Well, it startled us. There was no one out there that we could tell anywhere around us, or we never heard any other human activity like voices or vehicles or anything. So we jumped up. We're looking around for the source of this giant splash in the water, and we saw nothing. So we chalked it up as whatever. We tried to see if maybe a dead branch had fallen out of a tree and hit the river, but there was nothing floating. And then my grandfather said, well, maybe one of the rocks rolled off the other side and went in the water, but we never saw anything, right? So we sat back down, and after a few minutes, we're relaxed again, having a good time, just relaxing. And then I hear the sound of something crashing through the tree limbs, and I see this object out of the corner of my eye coming up through the tree limbs in an upward direction, and I see it was almost a boulder-sized rock, big enough to where a grown man would have a hard time getting his arms around it, come up through the trees and hit out, 30, 40 yards into this river. And we jump up. We're going, holy crap, what was that? And my grandfather yells across the river, around this time and says, you hoodlums, knock it off or I'm going to shoot. And I look back and he's running for the tent. So I know he's going to get his shotgun out of there. He comes back, and that's when we hear the most god-awful, guttural, howling scream sound you can imagine. I mean, even when I think about it to this day, I get shivers, the hair on my arm stands up. And so he cracks off a shot over there, and I'm scared to death. I can't move. And this thing starts letting out more screams and howling type things. And he yells at me, he says, get to the truck, boy. So I go run to the truck, and I'm cowering down behind the front of it, peeking around toward the direction all this commotion's going on. He cracks off, 3-4 shots over there, and I see the 50 and 60-foot trees start shaking, and this thing's roaring over there. I mean, and you can imagine in a big canyon, this roaring, howling, screaming sound is just echoing down through there immensely. And see, the other side of that river is very steep and rugged. It's a normal place that normal people wouldn't even attempt to go try to get down to the river on that side of the river because it's very steep. And that's when I start seeing those trees shake, and that it comes into a clearing there, and I seen the creature from about the waist up just making one god-awful ruckus going up through there as it's walking up and away from us. And about that time, I knew my grandpa had seen what I saw too, because he came running toward the truck. He grabs me by the arm and flings me in the truck. I fly from the driver's side all the way to the passenger side, and the only thing that stopped me was the door, or I would have went right through the truck, And he jumps in and he says, son, or said, boy, we're not, that's not of God. We're getting out of here. So he slammed, he cranks the truck up and spins out, And as we're going up and out of there, he's bottoming the truck out, and I've just got my head buried in my hands thinking we're going to die because he's going to break the truck down. That thing's going to get us. And we finally make it up out of there. It's about a 2-mile drive down in there on the dirt road back to the hardtop road. And he drives around for a while. He's not saying nothing. I'm shaking. I'm scared to death, you know. He finally pulls over, and he starts talking to me, and he says, you know, we better not tell anyone about this because they're going to think we're crazy. And he was a preacher. He was a Baptist minister for 40 years after World War II. And this man wasn't scared of anything. You know, he was storming the beaches at Normandy. He was in the second wave, and he was scared. And seeing him scared made me even more scared because I knew he saw what I saw, and, you know, that thing was massive. And my grandfather was a very big guy, and this thing made him look little. I mean, the shoulders on this thing were twice as wide as his, and he was 6'5", you know, just a hulk of a man. And, you know, we never spoke of it until after he died. That's when I decided, you know, I got to tell this story because really that's what, you know, started me in the paranormal, you know, and I've never told anyone about it because I made a promise to him. And come to find out, when I decided I was going to tell that story, you know, I went and I called my uncle up because I wanted him to know what happened to us, and I'm going to talk about it. Well, he said, oh, you're talking about the time you and Grandpa saw that monkey man. And I said, what? He told you? And he said, yeah, he came to me like 25 years ago and told me about it because he said he wanted someone else to know in case something happened to him, what you and him saw that day. So
can we just cut back a little bit just so we revisit some of the details. So when and where was this incident that happened?
It was in West Virginia, like I said, on the Gauley River in 1983 in the summer.
Cool. And can you describe a little bit about what his face looked like?
I didn't see the face. I saw it from an angle, saw the back of him. He never looked back at me. He was just going up through the woods, tearing, and, you know, walking on 2 legs and just shaking the hell out of the trees and yelling and screaming.
And in terms of its color, do you remember what color it was?
It was a dark brown, blackish color. You know, and you got to remember it was just before, you know, it was just in the evening, about maybe 30 minutes before dark. So, you know, the color could have been slightly lighter or whatever, but I don't know because of the darkness that, you know, I saw this thing at. It was and it was about 60 to probably 50 to 75 yards away from us. So.
So you do investigations. Obviously, you've written a book about West Virginia Bigfoot, and you've done investigations, obviously, over a number of years about that. Is West Virginia a good place to see Bigfoot? Would you say? And if so, why?
I refer to West Virginia and all the several of the surrounding states here as the Pacific Northwest of the East Coast. Man, we've literally got hundreds upon hundreds of reported sightings of these large, hairy, bipedal creatures roaming the mountains, you know, here. In the book, you know, I've interviewed a large amount of people over the years, and, you know, from law enforcement officers to doctors to lawyers to teachers and more. And these are people that are credible people that really have something to lose by sharing their stories, you know, by sharing their encounters. And when you hear their accounts, you know, you can look at their face. You know, most of the time I interview them face to face, and I try to gauge whether they are telling me the truth or if they are lying. And the ones that I put in the book are very compelling stories. And I thought it was important to share some of those stories in the book, you know, and that's basically what the book is all about. It's my encounter and many other people that have either visited West Virginia or live in West Virginia that have had similar encounters to the one I had in 1983. And then there's, you know, it talks about some of the theories about what Bigfoot may be and more, you know, so get the book and check it out. It's a pretty interesting read.
Good. I mean, when we think about the encounters in West Virginia, do the encounters have a correlation in terms of physical description, or the variances? Are most of them like yours, or are they different?
I mean, they all are very similar in nature to the descriptions. Dark brown, reddish, and black color in color. Same type of physical attributes, like very large and muscular in stature. Some were just sightings like running across the road. Others felt very scared or intimidated when they had these encounters. And there's a whole bunch of different ones, in the book.
I'm very interested because I've seen great apes in the wild. I know you didn't see the face. The reason I ask about the face is I'm interested in how the face might be different from, say, gorillas or orangs. Did you have any of your witnesses describe facial features, and if so, what did they look like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got some in there. They got the heavy protruding brow line. They've got now, I did see the shape. The head on the one I saw looked very small, with like no neck compared to its shoulders. This thing was massive across the shoulders, and the head actually looked small proportion to the body. And others as well. They describe a large head with almost a pointy, conical type head, large brow, with human-like features in the face, the eyes, and that face was not all covered in hair. And same with the hands on some of these descriptions and whatnot.
Excellent. I mean, I feel like we're only touching on things because we've only got an hour. But there is, if I may, I want to turn to one unusual and kind of bizarre creature that we've never really discussed in any capacity anywhere else before. This flatwoods monster, have you ever researched it? And if so, could you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Oh, yeah, I've researched it quite a bit, actually. I was actually in a movie about it, a documentary. Basically, this would take up a 2-3 hour show to even touch on the surface of this whole deal. But basically, in 1952, there was a whole UFO wave happening over the East Coast and really all over the United States, but mainly on the East Coast. I mean, UFOs were spotted over D.C., over the White House, on multiple occasions. In September of 1952, numerous witnesses here in Flatwoods, West Virginia, witnessed a fiery craft come overhead and make calculated turns and come to land into what was known as the Fisher Farm at the time. And a group of young boys was playing football on the local grade school right down the street and they were the main ones that observed this thing. So they ran home to their house, which was right up the street, and talked to their mom, told her what they had witnessed, and so there was an older male there that was actually in the National Guard with the family, and they all proceeded with flashlights up the hill to where this craft supposedly had come down. Well, at the same time, while this was going on, no one knew this, but a crack team of special forces was sent in by the Pentagon to investigate a supposed downed aircraft. The group was separated into two groups, commanded by then Captain Levitt. He took his group covertly into the back way to the Fisher Farm, and the other group was down on the Elk River, which was in the area, searching for this supposed downed aircraft. Now, if you take that into account, that means the Pentagon and the military was tracking this craft. If they were in there within just a short time, an hour or two, from the time it went down in the Flatwoods area. So the boys they proceeded up the hill to the Fisher Farm to see what had happened. And as they got up there, they began to smell this putrid smell. And as they were looking around, according to a couple of the eyewitness accounts, two of the boys saw some sort of craft down in a gully in the field to their right, and the other ones were looking to the left, and that's when one of the boys flashed his flashlight, and there was a 10 to 12 foot tall creature standing there under a large oak tree. Of course, this scared that he let out a scream, and they all supposedly saw this thing. It had glowing eyes, and there was smoke coming out of it and around it. And there was supposedly some type of noxious fumes, there. Well, when they, upon observing this, they ran away as fast as they could back to the house, calling the local law enforcement and everything. And the newspaper was involved and everything else. Well, at the same time, during the night, the Special Forces unit was in there. They were ordered to collect any type of evidence that they could and send it back to the Pentagon post-haste. Well, many years later, the Captain Levitt, he reported in an interview that he collected some type of oily substance. He also reported there was impressions in the ground where it appeared that something had indeed made contact with the ground, and he sent the samples back to D.C. and never heard anything back. And in his own words, he felt that there was definitely some sort of cover-up going on. Now, the very next day, and there's a lot more that entails with the original eyewitnesses and stuff, but we just don't really have the time to go into all of it. But the very next day, there was a young couple who had a young child, and they had, during the whole Flatwoods incident, they had been visiting their relatives in Ohio, and they were from New York. Their names were George and Edith Snatowski. And they were returning home, and they had some extra time, so they decided they would take the scenic route, and they had dropped down from Ohio into West Virginia, and they came down through an area known as Strange Creek, which was just a few miles away from the Flatwoods Monster incident. Well, for no apparent reason, their car stalled out. So, they pull off the side of the road. George gets out of the car, starts trying to figure out why the car is not running. He knew the battery was just recently checked. The battery was good. There was no burning, or anything. And as he's doing this, he's smelling a very noxious type of odor. So bad, in fact, that the baby in the back of the car was affected, and they were coughing and choking from this noxious fumes themselves. Then he became very frightened and thought the car might be on fire because of these noxious fumes and this smoky type of stuff that was floating around in the air. As he was searching the car again, thinking it may be on fire, he noticed a glowing purplish white glow coming from the woods next to the side of the road where they parked the car. As he's looking out into the woods, he soon walks closer, and he looks down over the embankment and sees a type of ovally type of circle that he described that looked like the 50s style street lamps, but 100 times bigger, floating out in the air in the woods. So he makes his way over towards it, and as the closer he gets to it, he starts having physical effects from this thing. As he got really close to it, he described a feeling as if he was being shocked, and there was millions of needles going into his body, and it actually made him go down to his knees, and he got really close to the thing, and then he was so overwhelmed he became violently ill, started vomiting, and he was struggling trying to make his way back to his wife and child in the car. As he's getting closer to the car on his way back, he looks and sees his wife looking right past him, and she lets out a blood-curdling scream, and he looks over his shoulder, and he sees the silhouette of a large 10 to 12-foot creature pursuing him. Well, mustering all the strength he could possibly get, he makes his way back to the car, gets in the car, they grab the baby, and they huddle down in the floorboards of this 1950s car and are scared to death. After several minutes, he decides to, and when they were down on the floor, he gets in the glove box and pulls out a knife that he had in there, as for protection. So after several minutes go by, he decides to peek up and look over the dash to see if he could see anything. When he does this, he sees this creature standing out in the front of the car with a long, spindly arm, and it is kind of touching their car as if it was trying to figure out what the car was. And the thing has no legs. It's in some kind of metallic suit-looking apparatus. And the thing, after he watches it for a few seconds, it simply turns and glides away. So as they're observing all this, they're scared to death. The baby's crying. They're both scared out of their wits. They start looking, and they see that craft rise up to approximately a few thousand feet, as he described it in his interview, and observe this thing start moving in a pendulum fashion, back and forth, and it's getting faster and faster, and then it just, in a flash, he just says that they witnessed this thing speed off with sparkly trail coming behind it. Within a few minutes, he decides to try to start the car again, and it starts up, and they drive out of there as fast as they can, shaken beyond all belief. And in the description of the creature, it's almost identical to what the original witnesses saw that first night. And there's more to the story, but this, like I said, you can go on for a long time telling the story. It's a fascinating case with multiple eyewitnesses that happened over numerous days.
Yeah, I feel like we've only just begun the story, but we only have an hour, unfortunately, to go. But that's tantalised us for future reference, and I like that. That's given me some opportunity to consider that. So we haven't got time.
Yeah, check out the movie The Flatwoods Monster by Small Town Monsters. It's a really good movie. It tells most of the story. It's very good, very well done.
I certainly will. Now, in terms of you, what's next for you? What can you tell us you're doing, and what future projects do you have?
Well, recently I've been seen on the Travel Channel on a show called Paranormal 911. It tells an account out of my new book as well. And I was also seen on a show called In Search of Monsters, investigating Point Pleasant, the Mothman. You can check that out on the Travel Channel. And I'm currently filming a new show that's going to be on History Channel starting on July 19th called The Unexplained with host William Shatner. So a lot of cool stuff coming up.
Very cool. And when it be Unexplained, will that be a variety of different things? Or can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
A variety of various topics in the paranormal, to hauntings and more. And it's going to be a really interesting show. And I'm excited to be a part of it. And a lot of stuff coming out. I got several books coming out this year and next year. A lot of stuff in the pipeline right now. And you can check out a lot of what I have on my website. It's www.davespinks.paranormalinvestigator.com.
Excellent. And what's your next book, do you think, if you had to say what should people look out for?
Well, I have a couple of books in the pipe right now. One is called Willow's Weep on a haunted house that I own in Indiana, and doing some stuff with that. And then got a UFO book in the works that should be out either late this year or early next year.
Excellent. You've recovered from these conferences you've been at now. Did you have a good time?
Oh, yeah, man. It's always great going to conferences, meeting people, hearing their stories and their experiences. I've got several more conferences coming up. I'll be at the we're having a conference at Willow's Weep June 21st. It'll be me, David Weatherly, John Zappis, Barry Gaunt, the Paris Sisters, and Kristen Lee. Then I'll be at the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in late July, and several more coming up later in the year. You can find them all on my website, and I'm updating it constantly with new events and new speaking engagements.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show, and your stories and accounts have been fascinating, so we appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys, anytime. I love talking to paranormal.
Yeah, you clearly do. Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dave Spinks. I mean, his stories were fascinating, and I thank them on behalf of Mike and I thank him very much for those stories. No show next week. The week after, we'll be having a special on Port Chatham, where I've just returned back from, and the uninhabited and very creepy place in Alaska. So please listen out for that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mike. Good night.